Here is how you create a text layer onto a Photoshop document. Okay, so I'm going to go over to my layers panel and I'm actually going to drag my slider up and just select layer 7 just so I know the text layer is going to go on the top instead of behind something. So then all I do is I click on the little T here and I'm going to click and drag out a text box. And I'm going to type in something. And then I'm going to highlight it. And then I'm going to go up to where up at the top you should see a bunch of options for editing the text. And if I highlight that, I can actually click through using my arrow keys on my keyboard. So I can actually see what those fonts are going to look like when they're applied to my actual words. And I'm going to find one that I like. Then I'm also going to highlight where it says 30 points or whatever number it says for you. And I'm going to bump it up until it feels right for a title. Okay, so depending on the font choice that you used, I might need it to be bigger. So what I did there is I just went back to the move tool. Sometimes I do these things automatically. And I'm just like moving this into place where I might want that title to be. I'm also noticing a few things, like it's going to be hard in this area because the grass or the tree is green, which is a darker color than over here where the background, so these letters kind of get lost. So I could either, if there was room, I could like push my title up higher, so that might work, but that also feels a little too close to the top. But I might be able to find a place, like that's not bad actually. But I will be showing you a few techniques that you can use later on in order to make those letters pop out. But for now, place it in an area where it seems to be the most legible, where the background is kind of consistent. And then I'm going to go back to my text tool and I'm going to highlight those letters again. And maybe there's a bold option. I'm going to look in here. No, for the font I've chosen, there's not a bold option. So this is the best it gets for me. And notice how it put that text layer right above layer 7 because I had selected layer 7 over here. And that's how you can create a text layer using Photoshop. The next thing that I'm going to show you how to do is how to use color adjustment tools. And this might be helpful if, say, maybe this ball of yarn seems a little too bright for this space. It's kind of standing out. It's a little bit too bright. So what I would do is I would click on my move tool. So I'm back in my home base. And there's two ways that I can add adjustments. One is I can actually click on my adjustments panel over here. And that's actually going to create a new layer, which I'll show you what that does. So if I find my layer 6 and then I create a new adjustment layer, we'll just do brightness contrast. It's actually going to create a whole brightness contrast layer. And notice how that affects my whole image. The advantage to this method is that it creates an actual layer. So if I go do other things like move stuff around and then I decide, oh, you know what, that's too bright, I can actually go back here to this brightness contrast layer, click on it, and then I should see the properties show up here, and I can change it. Okay, so it's called non-destructive editing, which is always ideal in Photoshop, to try to edit non-destructively whenever possible, because as soon as you start destroying pixels, you can't ever get those pixels back to the way they were originally because they have been destroyed. So that's a non-destructive way to do it. I can click and drag under the layer, so now I'm under layer 6 and it's only affecting everything behind it, and that might be one way to do it. Maybe instead of darkening the ball of yarn, I just brighten everything else behind it, and that makes the scene look a lot more cohesive. So that's one way that I can change this. Now if I really just wanted the ball of yarn to be darker and I didn't want the scene to be brighter, I can highlight this layer, press the trash can, and it will go away. And what I can do then is I can actually adjust just the particular layer, but this is a destructive editing technique. So once you do this, there's no going back to the way it was before. Those pixels have been destroyed and altered, and if you keep editing in this way, it will eventually degrade your image. So you only want to do this like once or twice per document. All right, so I'm going to click on layer 6, and I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, Brightness, Contrast. And that will create a flyout menu, but it looks really similar. And it does the same thing on the image, right? So I can tone it down a little bit, maybe get a little less bright so that it just visually integrates better into that scene. And I can click OK. And now notice how it did not create a new layer here because these pixels have now been altered. So those are the two ways that you can create color adjustments to create a more visually cohesive image. Another thing that you can do in Photoshop is you can download fonts from the internet. And you want to always look for TTF files. I've already uploaded a TTF file for you in the workshops document, O2 workshops. And then if you go to movie font, then you should see a file called Steel Tongs TTF. Or if you're using the online drive, if you just search Steel Tongs TTF, it should show up there as well, and you can download that. And once you have it in a location where it's on your desktop, so you can download it just directly to your desktop, you don't have to put this one on your flash drive. And you're going to double click on the TTF file, and then you're just going to click Install Font. And this one's going to tell me I already have this font, but it won't give you that error message. And then you'll notice that it shows up here, and these are all the fonts that I have downloaded special because I wanted something different. And then after I do that, that's all I do. I can just close this window out, and if I go back to Photoshop, then if I select my text tool and select my font here, I can find that. Should show up right here in my font book. So I'll type in Steel, or STE, and I can select that. And now when I type with Steel Tongs, the thing about Steel Tongs that's a little bit weird is, and the reason I'm showing you how to use this one specifically is because a lot of you might want to put this onto your movie poster because this is the kind of font that they use when it says like this information very small at the bottom. So you can, when you're typing just in lowercase, these whole words come up as like it's just like a character, but the whole word comes up. If you want to actually type words like my name or something, or your friend's name, or whoever you want to make up as being the director of your film, then I need to press the caps lock key, because when I'm typing in caps, then it's actual letters. Okay, and so obviously if I was going to have this be on my poster, I would want the font size to be a lot smaller, and I would have it, usually these you find at the bottom of the screen, so I'd actually want to create a new text box. So let's just Command C to copy that, just delete everything else. Oh, I guess I typed a lot. Press delete there, delete, all right. And then now I'm in the text tool, and I can click and drag out a new text box, press Command V, and now I have my credits that I could place across the bottom. Sometimes you can, if I go, sometimes you can put them along the side of the document. So if you go into Image, or Edit, sorry, Edit, Transform, Rotate, then I can click on these and it'll actually rotate that whole text box and turn the text. Because if you're in the text tool and you try to rotate it, usually it's actually gonna, oh no, it actually worked. Okay, cool, that's something new. All right, so that's another way you can do it. I would hold shift down when you turn it initially, because then it will only move the amount that you want it. All right, so that's the other way you can do it too. All right, so that is how you upload a font and how you can rotate a text box. So now I'm going to show you how you can use the patch tool in order to fix little blemishes or areas on your image, or how you could erase out certain portions of an image. So the patch tool is over here on your toolbar. It could be hidden under any one of these tools, but it's going to be the fourth one down on the left hand side. So you want to click on that to enact it. And then how the patch tool works is it's layer specific, so it works on the layer that you have selected. So I'm going to go over here. Notice how I just dragged my layer panel to be a little bit larger. And I'm scrolling down, and I'm actually going to select my sky layer, because I'm going to erase out this little bit of clouds here and just try to turn it blue. Okay. And so I want to make sure I'm selected on my correct layer. I have the patch tool, and then I'm clicking and dragging out a rough shape around the shape that I want to get rid of. And then I'm dragging, so I started my mouse in here and clicked and dragged to an area that contains a visual of what I would want to replace that area with, and then I let go. And you'll notice now that little wispy cloud is gone. And if I just click once outside of the selected area, now I've gotten rid of that. So you can see how that would be useful to get rid of maybe blemishes on faces, or if you want to make an object look like it's not there anymore, so you could kind of like, you could select part of this tree and then try to replace it with building, although, oh, I have to make sure I'm selected on the right layer for that to work. So it kind of works in this situation, but because there's like a lot of geometric lines involved, it's not going to work perfectly, so that's not super believable. But if this was a more simple background behind the tree, I could get rid of this tree branch entirely. So that's how you use the patch tool. Another tool is the healing brush tool, and this one works really great for just small maybe flecks that ended up on the image. Like if I wanted to get rid of this little white speck in the, because I'm being a perfectionist, I want to get rid of this little speck in the grass. And what that's going to do, it's kind of similar to how the patch tool works, but you select a source area. So you'll notice when I click, it says option click to define source point. So I can click OK. So I hold down my option key and I click where I want to replace it with, and then I can click and kind of drag, and I'm kind of painting with this space over here on top of this space over here. So that's one way to get rid of just little areas. And and then the spot healing brush is another good one. So if you click on that, that's one where you can just kind of tap a couple times on the image, and it'll try to it'll try to replace the strange object with what surrounds it. So that's a nice one too, where you can just kind of tap around your image. This one is good for kind of getting rid of maybe if you had a black spot that was on your lens, this would be a good tool to get rid of that. So those are the different tools in the patch tool genre that you can use. And then another thing I want to show you how to do is how to create a drop shadow, because we talked about how this letter here, these letters here, are maybe a little bit more difficult to read in this area because the background is slightly chaotic. And so what you can do for that is you can add a drop shadow, and you can also add an outer glow, and they're both in the same area. And so what you're going to do is go to Layer, Layer Style, and then drop shadow. And this dialog will come up and see all these different options. Right now it just checked drop shadow for me because that's the one I picked from the drop down menu. I have to make sure that I'm selected on the proper layer, which I did by clicking on the move tool and then clicking on my font. But you could also select it over in your layers panel before you went to this drop down menu that got you into here. So I can I can bump the opacity of my drop shadow because I'm not really seeing it just yet. It might not be very dark. The other thing is my distance was for some reason default set to 0. And so now that looks really funky because it's not really, there we go. We'll go back down to 33%. And now you can see how that drop shadow is showing up. Maybe I want it to actually be under, so I'm going to flip the angle around here, and now it'll be under. So that's one way. Drop shadows don't have to be black. If you click on this little button here, you can make them any color you want. So I can make a white drop shadow, I can make a green drop shadow, and I can actually see that changing in my image over here. Green's kind of weird, so we'll go with maybe a white and then bump the opacity up a little bit. But still, I can't see it very much. I think because behind it is pretty white. Okay. I can increase the spread of it as well. I better get a color that we can actually see though. So the distance, that's a little too far. So I can make it more spread out. I can make it larger, which actually almost like, this almost looks like a outer glow. Because it's going around all sides of the letter. And maybe I'd want to bump the opacity down just a touch. Okay, but you can see how using a certain color behind it will help to make these letters pop a little bit more to the foreground. So that might be something that you find useful. So the drop shadow, the other one is outer glow that you can click on. You can deselect drop shadow to stop using it. And you can see how it's putting this little white line around the edge here. And if I highlight that, then I get all these different options. They're similar to the drop shadow. But you can bump those around, maybe increase the size of it. See, now that font is becoming really popping forward and it's really easy to read. The reason it's kind of pixelated looking is because I added some noise up here. I can turn that back down and it smooths it out. So those are two ways that you can kind of, and that looks kind of nice. It actually blends nicely with the clouds and it helps make the text more legible. Okay, so I can click OK and that'll solidify the changes. Notice too that it has added a layer on here, so you can always you can turn it off if you want to see what it would look like before. Or if you double click on it, you can get back to this and make further adjustments if you'd like. So that's how to add an adjustment layer and make your font pop a little bit more. So this is how you're going to save the document for getting credit on the drive. So you're going to go to File, Save As, and then you're going to type in last name, first name, O2PSB, and then click Save, and click OK. And then you can upload the PSD document to the drive in the Turn In O2 Workshops PSB folder.